Hey everybody, it's your instructor Allegra, back again for our third weekly video for English 106 Online. Our objectives this week are multiple, including first, strengthening our understanding of the research process and the resources we have available to us from Purdue to help with that process. Second, coming up with potential research questions for our second writing project, which involves making a researched argument using various methods. And third, understanding the conventions and expectations of argument in its many iterations, especially the difference between academic and public argument. I also have a few reminders of what's due this week. First, your final writing project 1 is due along with its reflective memo by Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. That's the 1st of November. The prompts are still available on Blackboard, and you can always contact me if you have any questions, either via Google Chat or by email. Your reading responses for the week are also due on Wednesday, and they should include some potential research questions for our upcoming project. Blackboard also has a prompt available for this reading response. You'll be required to reply to your classmates' reading responses by Friday to give feedback on those developing research questions. So this week we're transitioning into our second writing project. We're turning from our digital autobiography, which is more personal, to our researched argument project, which can and should be inspired by issues that you care about, but is also more academic and scholarly in nature. The audience for this project should be a community of your scholarly peers. This means people in your own field or discipline if you have a major declared, or in a field or discipline that you're interested in if you're still exploring majors or think you want to switch. For this week, we'll focus more heavily on the beginning of the research process, but I want to emphasize that research doesn't always have to be linear. You can always circle back to your questions to square one if you hit a wall later on in your work. So the first step for doing research, whether it's for class or for another activity you're a part of, or just for your own curiosity, is to find a topic. And your topic can be just a couple of words because that's what's going to get you started. You'll continue to narrow and focus it as you go on with your research. Our books list some example topics on page 127. Your best work is going to be work that you actually care about, so make sure from the start that you know you're interested and invested in your topic. Students often pick a topic or an issue that's relevant to them in some way for this project, and it can be big and global, like the environment, or it can be a small and local topic, like wetland preserves in southern Indiana. Whatever you choose, no matter if it's big or small, make sure you're committed to the topic because the issue you work with in this project will follow you to the third and final project for this course. You'll be working with it for the rest of the semester. I have a few tips for you if you're at a loss for what to start researching because there's a lot of different strategies to help you come up with a topic. You can browse through the library databases and journals that are related to your major or future career. If you don't have a major or a career picked out yet, try looking at a field that you're interested in. For example, I've always been into space exploration, so I might see what NASA is publishing lately. Another great place to start is here, the Library Course Guide for English 106, which is available through our course's Blackboard site. The Choosing Topics tab over here has many different resources that you can use to select or narrow down a topic. And this includes my favorite resource, which is the Opposing Viewpoints in Context database right here. Topics and issues in Opposing Viewpoints are organized by focus area, like health and medicine, or energy and environmentalism, or you can look at them alphabetically in one giant master list under this Browse Issues tab. A reference librarian can help you find these sources, or you can search through what's available on the Purdue Library website. Looking through databases and journals and resources like Opposing Viewpoints and Context can help you see what other scholars and thinkers in your field are working on right now, and it gives you an added bonus of jump-starting the source finding part of your research. There are lots of lists of topics elsewhere online, and they can be helpful for getting you started, But the one drawback to lists like this is that the topics can be quite general and common to many students who take writing courses. For example, I can't tell you how many papers I've seen on the topic of medical marijuana. You may find yourself getting bored of a topic that you pick off of one of these lists, which is why it's important to specify. Once you have your topic, you'll need to narrow it down. This is when a Google search can be a good idea. You can use what you find on the internet, from talking to classmates, family, and friends, from browsing newspaper articles, and from other wide general searches to get an idea of the scope of your topic. If, for instance, you wanted to write about the environment, you might just Google the environment to see what comes up. The first few pages of results for a search can show you how others are talking about the environment and what they mean when they use that term. From there, you can narrow down how you want to talk about the environment and what you want to mean when you use that term. If you're really fascinated by, for instance, the effects of the feral cat populations on wildlife in a region, then you can narrow your topic down to environmental effects of feral cats and add in other related keywords as needed. The research questions that you develop from your narrowed topic should absolutely be ones that you're really interested in finding some answers to. You're free to develop research questions yourself, of course, but not all research questions are created equal. There are different types of research questions identified on page 130 of your textbook, all of which require different kinds of answers and different methods of research. These include questions of fact, definition, interpretation, consequence, value, and policy. These are the categories that Compose Design Advocate gives us, and they're drawn from an invention process that stems from ancient Greek thought. It's called Stasis Theory. Stasis Theory is a useful model for critical thinking and analysis. It can help you think through just about any problem. The stases, or the categories of questions, are fact, definition, quality, and policy. And they're broken down further on the Purdue OWL resource that we read for this week. You can use these categories to determine what kinds of questions you're asking, and therefore what kind of argument you're making. As we move further into research next week, you'll use these categorizations to help you determine where to search for sources, as well as what kind of sources you'll need. Here are some examples of deployment of stasis theory to make it a little bit more concrete. So the stasis questions, as I mentioned, are fact, definition, quality, and policy. And here's a nice bust of Aristotle, our ancient Greek thinker who helped to generate them. So to start out with fact, stasis questions of fact deal with, did a thing happen? Is there a problem or an issue? How did it begin and what are its causes? What changed to create the problem? What precipitated it? What are the facts here? And to make this a little bit more concrete, I want to talk about climate change, a very popular issue, through the lens of Bill Nye the Science Guy. Bill Nye asserts climate change is a thing. And to describe how the thing happened, he says, we're experiencing an abrupt increase in the Earth's temperature, and 97% of scientists agree that this is not due to normal fluctuations. The second stasis category is definition, and these types of questions focus on what kind of a thing is this phenomenon. Questions like, what exactly is the issue, and what is the nature of the problem? What are its parts, and how are they related? Who or what is influencing how we define the issue? So to answer the questions of definition about climate change, Bill Nye says, climate change is a thing and it is caused primarily by human activity. The burning of fossil fuels is causing global warming. This in turn creates catastrophic environmental consequences like ocean acidification. Moving to the question of quality, Quality stases deal with how severe a thing is. To what degree is it affecting people or the environment or whatever else is harmed by it? Is it a good or a bad thing? Whom might it affect? Who are the stakeholders who deal with this issue? What happens if we don't do anything? And what are the costs of solving the problem? Bill Nye says, global warming affects the entire population. We are all stakeholders in this issue. Specifically, he says that ocean acidification needs to be reversed as soon as possible because 1 billion people rely on ocean life as their major source of protein. We also may have homes and ecosystems threatened by rising sea levels. And the final major stasis is that of policy. So now that we've defined and set parameters around an issue, what exactly should we do about it? So questions like, should action be taken? Who should be involved in helping to address an issue? And what needs to happen to solve it are all questions of policy. To respond to these questions about global warming, Bill Nye says that we can all do something on a personal level to help mitigate the effects of climate change. We need to recycle and reuse things, walk or use public transportation, turn off electronics when we're not using them, eat less meat and more locally grown vegetables and fruit. All are things that we can do to influence the effects of global warming through acts of policy. Above all, your research questions, no matter what stasis they draw on, or stases, plural, should be specific. But remember that they can shift and change depending on what you find as you research. They definitely don't have to be set in stone right away. Thinking about researched arguments more generally, it's important to remember that the kinds of arguments people make in a public capacity, like in an opinion piece or editorial or a presentation at work, are not all that different from the kinds of arguments that people make in an academic capacity, like in a journal article or conference paper. Both of these kinds of arguments require thoughtful research that's accurate, respectful of other perspectives, and ethically represents information. The rhetorical situations of these arguments, specifically in their purposes, are similar too. Both kinds of arguments intend to persuade and inform. The big difference is that academic arguments are often highly formalized, whereas public ones are not. An academic article follows particular formats based on the field's expectations, but all academic articles talk about how the scholar or scholars came up with their topic and did their research, how the research is important to the field, and whose research the scholars relied upon. A lot of academic arguments, admittedly, aren't very entertaining, at least in a popular sense. And finally, academic arguments are usually primarily meant for experts in the field. Public or popular arguments, on the other hand, are meant for general audiences and don't follow such rigorous citation requirements. They can have different formats and organizations based on where the argument's being published and are usually meant to entertain as well as inform. So think about Bill Nye's argument here, which is targeting a more popular audience, a lay audience, who might not be as well educated, as specialized, or as technical as, say, an article about climate change in a peer-reviewed environmental science journal. We'll talk further about the requirements for citation in an academic argument next week. But as you do this week's readings, I want you to notice how sources are referred to. There certainly are sources. The composers have done their research, but they're not always attributed with any of the citation styles you may have heard of before in school, like MLA, APA, or Chicago. So that's it for this week's video. Please remember that your final draft and reflective memo for Project 1 are due on Wednesday, as is your reading response with your potential research questions for your second writing project. Your replies to those responses, giving your classmates feedback, will be due on Friday. Thanks so much for listening and have a really excellent week.